Hello and a very good evening to you, and welcome to Biz1st Review 360, where we bring you a roundup of this week's top business stories and developments that impact the Sri Lankan economy. I'm Krishan Devasagaya. Now, as countries around the globe celebrated World Ocean Day under the theme Our Ocean, Our Future, we looked at the future as an island nation strategically located in the Indian Ocean. Now, to talk about Sri Lanka's prospects towards a blue economy, we invited to our studios an environmental economist. Over to you, Sonali.
A very good evening and welcome. I'm Sonali Vanigapavige. Joining us in our studios is Dr. Atula Senaratne. He is a research fellow and the head of the Environmental Economics and Policy at the Institute of Policy Studies. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening.
Dr. Senaratne, you've done a lot of work with regard to this concept of the blue economy. It's rather a new concept. What is this?
Yeah, I mean that it's a kind of you know that there are a lot of color-coded words, terms coming up. So this color certain things, giving some emphasis to some important dimensions. So here that blue economy stands that we need to get the more advantage from our oceans while we are caring for sea as a kind of nature.
Now, this year World Ocean Day was marked under the theme Our Oceans, Our Future. I mean, to me as a layman, it just sounds like 4 words, but to you as an expert in this field, could you explain what is really the significance of this?
Well, I think the idea of that oceans as the future of human has been a long floated one. So then I think with the development of scientific technology and now that we are starting to understand more and more what things we actually that ocean can offer us, and of course what are our limitations. So I mean that we now we have come to a situation that sea is so vast, ocean is so vast, but we have come to a situation, humans can come to a situation that even this so vast sea can be impacted by our activity. So then therefore this idea of oceans for future, so we need to take the this vast resource base for the well-being of humanity, so we need to care for that. So that's the basic idea. I think you could have seen that there's an action theme also in this this year's Ocean Day that is focusing on plastic pollution. Yeah. So then it always goes with 2 other ideas. One thing, capturing the opportunities, then caring for the resource, and of course nowadays we always emphasize that inclusivity. Get the benefits, opportunities, benefits to the as much wider group of the people.
Dr. Senaratne, your message is powerful. However, a message is only as good as its implementation and dissemination. So how do you think we need to disseminate this information among the wider public of Sri Lanka to communicate to them the message of better protecting the oceans?
Yeah, so I think as far as the term is concerned, they are always catchphrase. So as you have suggested that what value of this term comes with how we are going to implement that. So in that case, I think what we need to do is that we need to come up with something like a blue economy strategy for Sri Lanka. So any country especially with the sea part of sea, you know that there are countries with landlocked countries. They don't have access, I mean they don't have a sea of their own. But in that case any country with access to sea ocean resources should have elements of blue economy. So we cannot call now it as a blue economy, but we all have elements of economy. So that can be implemented in a useful manner if we have to overarching strategy to bring these things. So I think the situation in Sri Lanka also the same. We are an island nation, so that we have a lot of involvement with oceans. So then we have it is connected to very much to our economy, so that all these elements are there. So then we have problems also associated with the sea. So that is a lot of pollution taking place. So land-based pollution also ultimately end up with oceans. Simultaneously, lot of sea litter from the ships and all these things enter the sea. So that these to come up with some kind of strategy to balance these interests, to harness the resources for our maximum potential, simultaneously caring for the resource. So that's the core. I think that should be the goal of blue economy strategy.
Okay, so it is imperative that the government and the relevant ministries are aware of this blue economy concept.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I think government has a big role to play, but not only the government. So I think when it comes to oceans, we all are stakeholders. So we citizens have a responsibility, then business has a responsibility, then civil society has a responsibility, and of course government may be the coordinator of all this.
Sure. Now, we see a lot of ad hoc development projects, short-sighted policies in Sri Lanka. On the one hand, we have humongous projects like the expansion of the Colombo port, the expansion of the Hambantota port. We have the Financial City project on the other hand. How do these projects impact our ocean?
Well, these all projects might have some kind of impact. So I mean that when we are going to have this kind of projects, we usually have an environmental impact assessment and all. Sure. So that part has been looked after to a certain extent. But simultaneously, we can think about these all projects in a broader framework of blue economy and sustainability. So in that case, my idea is that we could have better harness the value of these projects if we have a blue economy idea. So then this all can come up with a part of this strategy. So then we can see all these kind of things, that is benefits and that is problems, come into one strategy and take look after those things. So I think any country take these all develop projects to develop the country. So I think I mean always some good faith on this project. So but there could be problems. So I think this blue economy idea will help us to make it more balanced.
Stay with us. We will be back after this short commercial break. Welcome back. You're watching Biz1st Review 360. Now we are in conversation with Dr. Atula Senaratne, who is the head of Environmental Economics and Policy of the Institute of Policy Studies on Sri Lanka's ocean resources and our journey towards becoming a blue economy.
Fishing in Sri Lanka is one of its primary industries. It's one of our main exports. But there are concerns that in certain areas, fishing is not always carried out in a regulated, sustainable manner. In fact, it was quite recently that the European Union removed the ban on Sri Lankan fishing exports. So, Dr. Senaratne, how does this sort of impact on the whole picture, given into consideration the blue economy concept?
But the issue is that if you take the overall situation in the world, so the fish overexploitation has become a major issue. It is not a part of Sri Lanka alone. So if you take the international fish catch, out of that nearly 30% is considered as these fish stocks as overfished. So that's the situation. The ocean is a kind of open access resource, so that one can see that it is everybody's property and nobody's property. So that kind of situation.
So stronger legislation, regulations is what you're advocating for.
Yeah, so in that case, as I mentioned, that we cannot do it alone, because here that we need to work in an international framework. So international bodies of governance. So I think I use the word governance rather than. So then international bodies of governance of the sea comes up with some regulations and some kind of arrangements to make the situation sustainable. So we can align our policies and our strategies to go along with them, and so that's the way I think we have to go. So I think this whole issue of this EU ban, I mean, that exemplify that situation.
Dr. Senaratna, what are the potential areas that Sri Lanka can tap into in terms of ocean resources?
Well, we are already using the fisheries resources. So there is some potential that if you go through our fish production statistics from 1980s onwards, our fish production has increased. So this growth mainly came from the international catch. So that means that fastest growing, we have three kind of fisheries resources. One is inland, then coastal fishing, that is closer by seas, then deep sea fishing. So the major growth recent period has come from the international seas. So that's one area. So then we have a big potential to market our ecosystems and those unique resources, scenic resources, and those things as a tourism destination. I think we have been successful to a certain extent. We have been demarcated as one of the designated as one of the best tourism destination even in this year and for last few years. So definitely our arrivals are going up. So then there are untapped potential areas. One thing is that we are trying to harness to some extent that oil resources. So now we are exploring. So it has been identified that in the Mana Basin we have there is a potential that we have some petroleum resources. Yeah, so we are trying to harness that too, and simultaneously I think our position in the closer by main sea lanes and central position in the Indian Ocean and the east-west trade is actually taking place through these sea routes are major advantages, because I think we need to try this services sector here. So we have a big potential. Even from the ancient times, we were considered as a kind of trading nation. So China, Rome, and that kind of thing. So that this people came for spices trade to Sri Lanka. So that I think we need to revive this.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what is holding Sri Lanka back from becoming a potential strong maritime hub, given its strategic location on the one hand, its closeness to major sea lanes, as you mentioned, the exclusive economic zone? How can it sort of progress as a strong force?
Yeah, I think here that we have, while we are having opportunities, we have challenges also. We need to understand our challenges. So the first thing, as I think we are in a central position in a valuable resource base. So this valuable resource base is something that attracted attention of global powers. You know that the huge political show is going on in the Indian Ocean region. So that we have incumbent world power USA, then they have a presence, strong presence there. Then we have emerging world power China, so they are trying to expand their horizons. Then we have a rising power, our neighbor, so then they are trying to create influence. So in this world, we are a small player. We need to play for our strength, understanding the game. So understanding the game and play for our advantage. That's one side. So then I think the other major challenges is we need to develop responsible fisheries and sustainable fisheries. Simultaneously, we need to think about the future challenges. That is that we know that climate is changing. One of the major issues is that climate change, associated with climate change, is potential future sea level rise. We are an island nation surrounded by this sea. So if the sea level rises, so we definitely going to get affected. So we got the flavor of this thing during the 2004 tsunami, but it's a sudden thing, but this will take in place over time. So we need to understand that and we need to be ready about that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Athula Senaratne, for joining us on this edition of Biz Review 360.
On the other side of this break, a chat with trade expert on domestic barriers that obstruct trade. Welcome back to the program. Now, a recent study has found that eliminating domestic barriers to trade could reduce costs as much as 25 to 30%. Newsfirst journalist Chaturanga Hapuarachi sat for a chat with a trade expert from the think tank Verity Research to find out more.
Good evening to you. We are going to discuss the domestic barriers faced by Sri Lankan exporters with Subhashini Abesinghe, who is a research director at Verity Research. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for being here with us. At the outset, let me ask you, the popular belief is that there is a reduction of exports going out from Sri Lanka. Is this true, and what is the reason for this?
Yes, basically the idea is Sri Lankan exports have been growing quite slowly, especially in comparison to Sri Lanka's overall GDP growth. So as a result, if you compare from 2000 to today, our exports as a ratio of gross domestic product has declined from 33% to somewhere like 12.7%. And in the past few years, actually even the absolute values have been declining. Right. This has a host of reasons, both domestic and international, because the international economy is also slowing down, which means demand for exports from the world market has also declined. But what we are saying is, in addition to that, there are a host of constraints that the exporters face within their country that also affect export growth.
When we talk about these barriers that we have domestically, we know that there are barriers in terms of the rules and regulations or regulatory barriers. If we focus on that area alone, when there is barriers like this, a host of barriers as you mentioned, sectors like agriculture, small scale exporters have a problem, isn't it?
Yes, so basically agriculture sector is anyway, especially outside the tea and coconut, is largely dominated by the small and medium exporters, and agriculture generally is heavily regulated for very good reasons, because agricultural products, whether it's fresh fruits or vegetables, affect consumer health and life of people. And if you're talking about importation of cut flowers, plant material, these have a huge impact on the environment of a country, because various pests and diseases can come with what we are importing as well as what we are exporting. So as a result, it is normal to find agriculture trade heavily regulated to protect life and health of people, plants and animals. But in this process, what is important is to make sure that regulations do not unnecessarily impede trade and become an unnecessarily cost on the exporters that undermine their competitiveness and capacity to export. So what we've realized is there are significant amount of regulatory barriers that the exporters face simply because these regulations are poorly designed. One of the most important aspects of good regulation is stakeholder consultation, and frequently exporters have to abide by various regulations where they have never been consulted to understand the impact this regulation can have and what is the most efficient way of ensuring regulatory compliance whilst promoting exports.
Right. If you look at all of this, can someone point the finger at these competent authorities, maybe the government, and say the government is focusing its attention only on the external barriers for the exporters and not what is happening domestically?
Yes, so basically that has been one of the reasons why we wanted to undertake this research, because reviving exports has been a central policy agenda of the government from the very beginning, and in this agenda, a central focus had been negotiating free trade agreements to reduce reduce barriers our exporters face when entering another country, like the tariffs and all, when the costs and time taken to get permits to export, licenses, certificates. But what we've realized is in this process somehow the barriers the exporters face within the country has not received equal attention.
Why is this?
I think it is, there is also free trade agreements carry a sense of, hype in the world, which the domestic barriers don't, and partly it is easy to blame foreign governments for not failing to, for our failure to export, rather than taking responsibility as a government that we are also responsible for actually undermining the capacity and competitiveness. But in reality it is much easier for our government, who makes exports a priority, to address problems at home rather than compel a foreign government to reduce barriers that our exports face.
Right. When you look at this, Subhashini, the international world have definitely come up with mechanisms to cope up with the barriers that they have. But in Sri Lanka, does our government or any competent authority looking over these matters have a concrete plan to move forward?
So actually we feel that the timing of this research and the especially we are specifically focusing attention on border agencies, because import and export in a country is governed by a host of government agencies that actually patrol the border, right? So basically it can be from the plant quarantine, National Plant Quarantine Service, to the Sri Lanka Standards, Animal Quarantine, Forest Department, Fisheries Department. So there are a large number of organizations, especially in agriculture sector, that execute, that check the compliance of the regulations when the people export or import. So right now you may have heard about the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, and Sri Lanka is a signatory of this agreement. This agreement specifically looks at border efficiency and how countries can actually improve border procedures to facilitate trade. So I think in terms of timing, because we have already signed into a WTO agreement on this, and we feel in terms of timing this is good, because partly we are obliged internationally also to improve our border efficiency, but on the other hand, for Sri Lanka also this is very important, because we have made exports a priority.
Yes. Now we know that there are different types of exports going out, but when it comes to the agriculture, I want to focus the attention there. We know that they are perishable, we cannot have them for a long time, then there is a time constraint coming in. And once again, as you said, this is majority small and medium scale exporters. There are more barriers on them if you look at it in that sense. How can we manage this?
Yes, so actually we've identified, in addition to regulations, the procedures, because once the regulation is in place, you have to actually demonstrate your compliance with the regulations, and there is a procedure to do that. Maybe it's to get a test test report, certification, permit, various types of processes to demonstrate compliance. And what is really worrying is also the information barrier. There is very little attention that people face, how much the lack of information, accurate information in a timely manner, can affect exports. If I do not know, for me to export a particular fruit, what is the process, what are the regulations, what are the compliance requirements, what is the time taken to get the test reports, what are the fees that I have to pay, where can I take the application forms, who should I contact. So what we've realized is these are very basic information an exporter need, but unfortunately, despite all our government agencies having web portals, you will be amazed that these web portals do not provide simple information as accurate contact details. Application forms, it is so easy to upload application forms. So we realized 50% of this basic information of about 10 websites that we've checked is not available, and out of what is available, significant amount of procedures, application forms and other details are outdated.
Right.
And we feel that these are very easy things that can be rectified without, because today we are talking about going towards a digital economy, bringing all the public agencies to electronic platform, and making government agencies provide information online is very much in line with government strategy and can make an immense difference to the competitiveness of exporters.
Definitely. I also want to ask you a question about how the ad hoc decisions taken by various institutions, like we know in the agricultural sector, weedicide was banned, prohibited. So this also created a problem when it came to these agricultural exports. There was additional cost involved, production cost went up, and there is a weak consultation process with all the stakeholders that are involved. So these problems should also be addressed.
Yes, this is one of the biggest problems we have in terms of designing regulations and changing regulations. So what is very important is for us to understand, even it's not about the reason for banning glyphosate, which is a weedicide that is widely used in the country. It is the manner in which you ban or restrict a product. What is very important is you cannot bring, like, it's not advisable to bring bans overnight without consulting any of the stakeholders, because different segments of the people involved in agriculture can be affected in different ways, and they need alternative solutions.
Definitely.
So what is very important is to have that dialogue, because otherwise, for example, if you are a cut flower exporter to Australia, glyphosate is a weedicide that you used to dip your cut flower prior to export, and that is the only permittable chemical that is allowed by the Australian government, and that overnight they will not be able to export simply because of the ban. And on the tea sector, the problems that they have with weedicide, because lack of alternatives is a big problem, because pulling weeds by hand can have severe labor costs, plus soil erosion issues when we are talking about the hill country plantations, because during the rainy season this can be a problem.
With time running out, I also want to ask you a very quick question about this poor design. Aren't these examples that you've just given me examples for the poor design in regulation altogether?
Yes, it is, and it is not just, actually we've taken only agriculture as a demonstration, even in agriculture, which with a very narrow area, but this is a problem across the board that needs to be addressed if we are to improve the capacity and competitiveness of our exports.
Well, that's all the news we have for you tonight, but before we go, a simple reminder that you could always stay up to date on the latest happening in the business world simply by logging on to our Facebook page, that is Biz1st Review 360, and also by logging on to the Newsfirst channel on YouTube for the very latest happening in the business arena here at home. Well, take care, good night, and have a wonderful weekend.